Hi Kevin, Property Soldier here. I just want to do this quick video on your power team, or more specifically your service accommodation power team, because I get a lot of questions about this very subject, and the reason is clearly that it's a really important issue who to have in your power team. And so what I'm going to do is just list some key members and why they are so important to have in your service accommodation power team. I'm not going to be talking about cleaners or sort of the operational on the ground type people in this video. I cover that in other videos that you can find on my social media, on my YouTube, etc. But yeah, so professional people in your power team. So I'm going to start off with who I feel is the most important, and that is your accountant. Because there are so many moving parts in service accommodation, and it's quite a niche area of property investing, and therefore you definitely need to have an accountant that understands service accommodation or furnished holiday let, because as I've explained in other videos, most people doing service accommodation are actually doing furnished holiday let. So you definitely want to have an accountant who is experienced in this field. And if you are sourcing a new accountant or asking your current accountant whether or not they have experience in this area, do you know what they might say? Oh yes, I know all about that, etc. But do they have other clients, serviced accommodation clients, and what are those clients saying about them? I always prefer not to actually ask an accountant directly. I prefer to actually be led towards an accountant from referrals of people who are singing their praises and people who are doing that area of property investing. And so in this case it would be service accommodation. So are there any people that are going to recommend those people doing service accommodation going to recommend a particular accountant? Now I can sort of preempt what people might say in response to this video in comments. Oh, who's your accountant? Well, I don't blame people for asking me, but I don't give out my accountant's details to the whole of the internet, because I quite like my accountant to be able to pick up the phone to me once in a while. And so I do give out my accountant's details to people who attend my training, but actually that yeah, it's a win-win situation. I'm not on a referral with my accountant or anything like that, but people that have done my training, they are a lot more informed on serviced accommodation, and therefore they're going to be an easier client to handle for my accountant, not take up too much time trying to explain too much stuff, because I've covered an awful lot of it on my training, and my accountant and I are singing off the same song sheet as in terms of service accommodation. So people, obviously that's what I'm teaching on my training, and so therefore people are not trying to pull in the opposite direction. Okay, so yeah, really important that you've got the right accountant, and your accountant is going to be able to steer you in the right direction, because I get an awful lot of people saying to me, oh, you know, accountancy type questions. What type of company structure should I have? How should I move my money around? You know, how should we be buying properties between, you know, myself or my partner, or buying a limited company, or how should we be operating the business, etc. And an awful lot of the time that is an accountant question, because it depends on so many moving parts that are going to be particular to each individual in terms of their own circumstances and their finances. So I always have to say, look, I can give you some generic advice here, but you've always got to seek the advice of a professional in that field. So that's the accountant. The other person that I'm going to mention, a key power team member, is a capital allowance surveyor, because one of the main reasons why people do furnished holiday let and service accommodation is to avoid Section 24 tax, but also another main reason why people do service accommodation is capital allowances. So capital allowances are, you know, tens of thousands of pounds worth of tax-free income. Typically, property being used as service accommodation, you'd be able to claim 20, 30, 40,000 pounds worth of capital allowances, and I've had much larger claims than that, but I don't want to overestimate it. About 35% of a property's total expenditure that you've spent on a property you can get back as a capital allowance, so that might be 30 odd grand tax-free income. So it's really important that you've got the right capital allowance surveyor, because an awful lot of the surveyors that I've met over the years, actually they might not be specialists in serviced accommodation capital allowances. They might just be a capital allowance surveyor, and therefore they have totally underestimated the claim. I know that because I've kissed a few different frogs, and I'm now getting really good capital allowance claims in on my properties. I've even had 2 capital allowance surveyors who were quite good. Well, both were pretty good. I knew both were good, but I actually paid for them both to do a claim on the same property so that I could decide who was going to give me the most money over the long term. In terms of multiple capital allowance claims, it's definitely worth getting the capital allowance surveyor who's going to be able to create the largest claim for you. And so yeah, absolutely, again, you definitely need to have a capital allowance surveyor who knows what he is doing to get recommendations, get referrals. And I think it's really useful that the capital allowance surveyor needs to be in dialogue with your accountant as well, and they have to be on the same page in terms of tax as well, because they both go hand in hand. Your capital allowance surveyor ultimately is going to be handing over the capital allowance claim to you. You'll give it to your accountant. Your accountant has to be agreeing with the capital allowances. So those 2 people are really key. Also, you definitely need an insurance broker that understands serviced accommodation. But do you know what? Also an insurance broker that can do a lot of the fact find on the phone, so that they don't just send you a load of forms that, I don't know if you can relate to this, you've got a pile of forms in front of you, you don't know where to start with them, and you can be agonising over how to answer specific questions and taking absolutely ages. Well, I think a really good professional in any field can just get that admin done quickly over the phone with you, and they know which forms to fill in and which they can just strike through and things like that. So you definitely need an insurance broker that understands serviced accommodation and also goes that extra mile to help you, because it's really important that you've got the cover that you need in your serviced accommodation business. So I highly recommend that you operate your serviced accommodation business using a limited company, so your broker will be able to arrange public liability insurance for you in some circumstances, depending on how you are operating, professional indemnity insurance. And so really important that you've got the right cover in place for your serviced accommodation business, because you can't just use buy-to-let insurance, for instance, on a property that you're using as serviced accommodation. And then one other person that I'm going to mention in this list is a ratings surveyor, because serviced accommodation attracts business rates, and the valuation office agency are responsible for setting the business rates, but quite often I see it quite a lot that VOAs are overestimating what somebody's business rates should be, and in that instance you definitely need to have an independent rating surveyor to go into bat for you and to calculate what the business rate should be, so you don't end up spending too much money on business rates. Don't get me wrong, most people are just on council tax because councils aren't overly motivated to police this, because they actually get more money in from council tax. But if you do end up going on to business rates, don't forget you can get small business rates relief. So you've got £12,000 worth of relief, so that if your business rates are below that, and in most instances furnished holiday let is going to be, you'll end up actually paying no council tax and no business rates. But there are certain scenarios where you can only get relief on one of your properties, etc. So you don't want to end up paying too much in business rates. So a business rate surveyor is also important. So hopefully that was useful. Here's to your success in serviced accommodation, and remember, your future needs you.